Hello again, everyone. Hope you had a great time with the Spirit of Nikolai if you were in the brown track just before. If you're new here, I'm James. This is Wim Demey, a solutions architect of testing at CTG Belgium. Hello, Wim.
Hello.
I think you'll be talking about is survival of the fittest only for the fastest, which is related to manual testing, getting over some of the hype cycle that I think we're all used to by going to too many conferences. A lot of good skepticism in there. I am mandated to inform you that if you have any questions, you can leave them in the Q&A tab, and that puts you into a draw, I think, to win some Packet Pub books, if possible, and we will get back to those questions at the end of Wim's talk. Anyway, I'll let you have the floor, Wim.
Okay, thank you. And welcome in the session where we will talk about the question, is survival of the fittest only for the fastest? And to answer that question, I was looking back on my own career so far as a tester. I started in the late 90s in Belgium, and at that time, testing was easy. And why is it was easy? Because I was a manual tester and you didn't have a lot of other positions. Maybe a few positions for a test coordinator or a test manager. After the year 2000, I saw slowly the introduction of test automation, but it was still okay because, in fact, the most of my time on project I spent my time to manual testing. But I think for me, and not for me especially, but for IT in general, the big game changer was in around 2007, 2008, where we were confronted with DevOps. DevOps was, the term at least, was released in that year. And from that moment, we, manual testers, we were confronted, overwhelmed with a lot of strange terminology. And it didn't stop anymore. It just continue, and especially with latest trends like AI, big data, data analytics, robot process automation, it really go fast. And so one could wonder, okay, what does this mean for us, manual tester? Do I have a job tomorrow? Do I have a job within 2 years, 4 years? So what is the role of us manual testers in a world of fast rages? And before diving into the answer on that question, I was interested to know what the World Quality Report was telling about this trend. And for your information, the World Quality Report it's yearly published, and it is a good sign to know and to learn what is trending in the quality assurance and the testing domain. And if you look to the report and to this section, then that's the message is clear. Meaning, if we continue with traditional testing tasks like manual testing, we will be outdated. And you, manual tester, you have to jump on that train of all those new hypes. You have to broaden your skills to test automation, to be more technical. If not, then you will be out of the market. But I think that this is partially true if we consider manual testing as the execution of repetitive test cases. So especially in regression testing. There, I think that over time, if we really are stuck to that kind of testing, our job will be eaten by test automation. But at the other hand, I can firmly state manual testing is not dead. It's definitely not dead. The only thing is it's evolving. And why it's evolving? It's evolving for many reasons. First of all, we are living in a more complex IT world landscape. We have more complex architecture. We have microservices. We have the cloud. So for manual testing, it becomes more complex. And even if it's maybe technical possible to automate an application or to automate a batch of test cases, it's not only always relevant, or it hasn't always an added value. And look at this product at the left side. Well, if you ask me, okay, do you want to test this in a manual way, or do you want to sit on the toilet while behind you and under you we run a batch of automated test cases? Well, definitely I prefer to test this product in a manual way. And when I was preparing this presentation and the slides, I found a very interesting post on LinkedIn. And indeed, if you are contacted by recruiters, by headhunters, it seems that it's only about techie jobs, jobs for web service tester, test automator, performance tester, and so on. And it seems that we are not looking, and we don't search anymore for manual tester. But even, like I said before, you still have products which are so complex that manual test is required, because how would you otherwise test an airplane, for example? And another reason why I think that manual testing is definitely not dead is because the test automation, the rate of test automation, it's not always the hallelujah of the Wahala. And that for three reasons. What I call the automation fake news, the automation paradox, and the automation blindness. So let's see what do we mean with automation fake news. Well, that's typically the promises that are made by tool vendors, by big believers of test automation towards their management, the stakeholders, about all the benefits of test automation. And for example, one of the biggest advantages of test automation is the so-called unattended testing, meaning on Friday evening, you launch a battery of test cases, and you hope by Monday morning you enter your office and everything has successfully been executed. But it didn't work always like that. And even in my first automation project, I was running in this kind of mistakes because we forgot that the server was updated. So server stopped, restarted, my unattended testing was interrupted. Or in the traditional UI automation testing, we forgot that the screensaver was popping up. So again, my batch was interrupted. And when I came in on Monday morning, I have to relaunch my batch. So my benefit was not realized what I had expected. The second one is we see more and more, especially also in development, the trend to what they call low-code application, codeless, headless things. So meaning that you can develop applications without writing real dozens of lines of code. And it's the same trend that we see in automation. So with the goal that even whatever your background, you don't have to be technical anymore. You can make any automation script. But if that would be really true, then I wonder, why do we have all those kind of frameworks? Why do we use a lot of best practices from the development world into our test automation, like object-oriented frameworks, like keyword-driven frameworks, like design patterns, page object models? So we use a lot of things which are common and which are best practices in development. So meaning there is still a lot of coding behind our test automation. And a last thing in the fake news is what is called the one-click automation. And that is especially playing a role in the area of CI/CD. So when you have a pipeline, of course, you want that by checking in your code, your automated unit test, your automated UI test, they are executed all as part of the chain. And then one once that is successfully done, then your application is deployed to whatever environment, even right to in production. Well, especially with that last step, the step to push our application in the production environment, I see with a lot of customers still a kind of hesitation. And especially that last step, they want to do it manually because they say we want to keep it to control it, to keep it in our hands, because we don't believe that if everything is done with one click on the button, maybe something can go wrong. So there are some examples that automation, it's not always what we expect from. Another thing is what I call the automation paradox. And the automation paradox that is relevant when you work in an agile context. And for me, one of the reasons why agile was invented or was implemented in project was to release faster, to provide quicker feedback compared to traditional waterfalls project. But if we then look to agile projects where test automation is embedded in the sprints, then we see always a kind of a fight in that sense that it's hard to keep up the same pace of development to follow for automation. Meaning, in the first sprint, ideally, we have automated everything what was developed in sprint 1. But typically, we see that not everything was ready. So in sprint 2, we need to continue with some left actions from sprint 1. But of course, in parallel, we have already some activities we need to automate for sprint 2. And this still continues. And could be that in sprint 3, that we saw that something, a functionality, a feature, which was developed in sprint 1 has been changed. So meaning we need to do some maintenance for the automation of sprint 1, while we still have to keep up with the automation task for sprint 3. And typically, you see that in the last sprint before going to production, typically that it's reserved as what I call a hardening sprint, meaning you bring all the things together, and that sprint is used to do a kind of an end-to-end test. But even in that sprint, we are still automating new things. So that's for me a little bit a contradiction with the idea behind agile to go faster, to go quicker to the market. And another side effect of the automation paradox in agile is that we see that sprint after sprint, or a number of automated test cases is growing. And if those automated test cases are part of a CI/CD pipeline, they are executed every time we launch our pipeline. And so we could end up in a situation where maybe we are ready to go into production, but we still need to wait until the completion of our automated test case battery. So that's, for me, a little bit a paradox. Another thing and a reason is what I call the automation blindness. And here you see a typical example, which is the heaven for an automator. And why you see a lot of parameters, and behind every parameter you have a lot of values. So that's the ideal candidate to automate and to pull in all kind of combinations in one big Excel file, attach it to our script, and then we run all the kind of combinations. But are we skeptical enough? If we have an Excel file with 500 combinations, do we need to run them all? For example, if we know that the color of a car in price, if it doesn't matter if it's red, blue, black, or yellow, so do we really need to cover all those values in our combinations? Or maybe can we do an exercise to try to minimize the number of combinations in order to have a good coverage? And another side effect of the blind is what I see in the reports that are coming out after a test run. And even I admit that in the projects where I was doing test automation, we just mainly focused that the report was there. So then we were happy and we say, okay, the batch has run, all the cases has executed, and we just were quickly scanning the results, but we never went into the detail of all the passes and the failures. And so we never detected if maybe we have a false positive. If I have a green flag, okay, does it mean that I have covered all the validations, like if you need to do a check on the database level, or if you need to check if by creating a customer in another interfacing system that the customer was there, that an ID was created, did you automate those validations? Because if we don't automate all the checks that we normally do in manual testing, of course, our test automation is a little bit of wordless. But also with the failures, if I have a red flag, is it really an application failure, or is it maybe a failure as due to my automation code? Because, like I said before, behind the automation frameworks, there is still a lot of code that we write ourselves. So there is a big chance that we introduce bugs by writing test automation code. And this kind of analysis is not made thorough enough to my opinion. So that were three reasons why I think, okay, test automation is the fast rate. It's not always the silver bullet, and it would not solve and cover all the types of testing we have to do. So survival of the fittest, it will definitely not be for the fastest. But then the question is, okay, if we manual testers, if we have still a role, what is a role, and how should we prepare ourselves to be future-proof, to be prepared for the new normal? And to do that, I have 4 messages for you. The first message is transform to a no-sheep tester. And maybe if you see this image of a sheep, you are thinking, okay, what is the link between a sheep and us testers? Well, let us be honest. Sometimes manual testers, we are sheeps. We are sheeps in that sense that we are bleating. We are bleating because we don't have decent requirements. They are not fully documented. They are still in revision. So we can't start designing our test cases. Or my test data is not there. I thought that my DBA was preparing the environment, but it's not there. And when I finally can start my test, the build is not stable. I find still a lot of bugs. So we have a lot of reasons to complain, to bleat as a sheep. Well, my advice is transform to a no sheep tester, meaning we manual testers have some unique techniques compared to manual testers that we could use in our advantage, in our benefit. For example, if you don't have decent requirements for manual testing, in fact, that's not a problem at all. Why not? Because even without very vague, undocumented requirements, you can do exploratory testing. And by doing exploratory testing, you will detect maybe some gaps in not only in the quality, but you will reveal some vagueness about requirements which need to be discussed with the analyst. And that's in our benefit, because if a test automator has no decent requirements, then he cannot start his automation, because an automator needs to know exactly which fields do I need to complete, which validations do I need to do, which buttons do I need to click. So that's in our benefit. Even if we have no data, we can do what I call selfish data generation, meaning as a prerequisite, maybe as another test of our battery of manual test, you can create your test customer, your test account yourself, up to the level, of course, where it's possible. Because if you have a system like SAP, then with an SAP, of course, you need the preloaded master data. But in some cases, you can create your own starting situation. And in parallel, it has the advantage that indirectly you do already a small test of the system. And for the last complaint, so if the build is not stable, well, we have things like a smoke test, a sanity test. And if you get green light from your developers, don't start blindly by executing the test cases you have prepared, but do some basic checks, do some basic scenarios. And if those are failing, then send it back to sender and say, hey guys, we didn't meet the entry criteria, so let's first tackle this before we continue. Otherwise, we are spending money, time, and budget. So my first message is transform to a no-sheep tester. The second message is cut the crap. And this message is based on one of my favorite albums released by The Clash. I thought somewhere in the late 80s. And well, cut the crap. It's a meaning in English, and it's say, okay, get to the point. No bullshitting. No, tell me like it is. And I think that here we manual testers, but not we manual testers, but also test coordinator, test managers, we can still learn a lot. And why? Because we have, for all kinds of reporting, we have very nice metrics which express the number of test cases that are being executed, the number of open defects, the number of the time it takes to solve a defect. But I think, and that's my experience, when especially when you're talking with the business and UAT, they are more interested in what is the overall feeling. And maybe we can evolve from a more raw data-based reporting to what I called a subjective reporting. Like here, you see an example of such a subjective report. It just contains colors, and it just, like for example, you see the 6 modules of that application, and directly in a versed view, you see directly, for example, with the everywhere part, we see that the defects, it's not good. And a stakeholder is per se not interested to know, okay, do I have 100 defects open? Do I have 200 defects open? At least by flagging it as red, he knows, okay, that's a very touchy point. We need to work further on it before we release. And with the first scrub, the business happiness index, it can give you an overview over time. What did we release? On which point did we release? And if we see a drop in the index and the curve, maybe it's linked to the fact that after release we had a lot of production issues, or we had, for example, an issue with performance. So it's another way of reporting, and especially more towards the business, this can be a big benefit. And in fact, instead of cut the crap, I call it cut the crap. And to me, a stakeholder is mainly interested in in 4 questions. Can I enter data in my application? If I can enter data in my application, can I retrieve the data? Can I change the data? And if I have the permissions, if I have the rights, can I delete the data if I need to do that? And in fact, that's the most 4 basics activities you can do in whatever application. And by thinking more in this crap philosophy, you can define what is the crap point. And the crap point is in fact finding the good balance between risks and the cost of testing. And it depends from the context. For example, in the left side, if you have a one-time ticketing website, so you plan a big event, you create a website, and after that event, you don't plan to use that website anyway, then maybe it's not needed to go all the way. And with a little effort of testing, it can be enough. While, for example, if we see in the banking area, where we see the trend that banks are moving from a physical business model to an online model, they cannot afford to release a mobile app or an online banking platform which is crap in terms of quality, in terms of features, because there is a lot of competition out there. And if you don't offer the right quality, people will just go to another bank. And of course, that would mean that for such an online home banking application, we will do more testing. We will invest more in testing compared to the example in the left. So that was the second message, cut the crap. The third message is get your fika. And get your fika is based on a famous Swedish tradition. And fika, it's in fact in Sweden, it's kind of a ritual where in the morning and in the afternoon, people drop literally their work for half an hour. And in that half an hour, they gather in the coffee corner or in a cozy corner. They sit together and they are socializing. And they are talking about everything except work-related or project-related things. And this kind of moments are very useful. And in fact, we tester, and in fact, no matter the role you have, you could benefit by participating to such moments. And often I ask testers, okay, what is in an office, what is the most dangerous place for a tester? And that's the coffee corner. And why? Just think at your last project, just think at your last defect meeting. Where were decisions made? Where were discussions starting? Often you see when people are in the meeting room, you see not everyone is telling what is in his mind, without his opinion. And when we come out the room, when we take a coffee or even in the smoking area, then people start talking. Then the frustrations come out. And why it's crucial to participate in such fika moments, it helps you as manual tester to read the mindset. And if you were in a meeting and, for example, it's to take the decision, a go, no go, and you still have 20 open severe defects and the business is insisting in a meeting to go into production, maybe with a coffee, you can learn what is the trigger behind. Maybe there are some political games played, and for some reason there is a big pressure on the business, whatever the status of testing, just to go into production. And I had one such a project where the quality was really very bad, but the business just decided to go into production. And finally, the real reason was the fact that the marketing department, They had already made a lot of promotion on different media channels. And they just told the business, sorry, we did a lot of investments. We cannot return back. So we need to go into production, whatever the quality. And if you are part of such FICA moments, and by listening to the business, to your developers, you can detect what are the impediments. Why is a developer fighting with me to accept my bugs? Why is there always a discussion about the severity? And in one of the projects, I was in such a situation. In every defect meeting, the developers try to minimize the severity. And then finally, by talking with one of the developers, then it revealed that they had a contract with the customer, and in that contract there were penalties. So when we go into production, and based on the outstanding defects linked to the severity, there were some big penalties. So the developers, they have all the interest to minimize all our bugs, try to close them as soon as possible. But it was only by talking them, by having an informal chat, that I discovered this kind of information. And if you really want to use this kind of moment more in a semi-formal way, and in the real Swedish tradition, that is it's definitely not the goal. But if you want to use it in a formal way, you can apply an agile technique which is called lean coffee. And a lean coffee, it's very easy. With a group of people, let's say between 5 and 10 people, you just sum up some topics, and then by voting with hands, you decide which topic will be discussed for the next 10 minutes. And could be that you take one of the elements that is blocking you from progressing, from starting with testing, or maybe there is another hurdle that needs to be discussed. So by applying the lean coffee, it's less formal, and it can help you to use this informal moment. So third message for manual testing: get from time to time your FICA. And this is exactly aligning with the latest World Quality Report, because we saw in the beginning of the presentation an extract of the previous World Quality Report about test automation, but in the latest version, then one of the recommendations is we still need to be more part of the business. Even it's already for decades that we are talking about finding the connection with our stakeholders, with the business, but we are not yet there. So we need to be part of the business. We need to really listen to the users, what is in their mindset, and based on their feedback, to adapt the way we test, the way we present our information. And the last message for you is think locally. And no, it's not a typo. And think locally. Why? Because we, like I said in the beginning of the slide, we are living and working in a very complex landscape. And in the past, for our work as manual tester was quite easy in that sense that we are working on one kind of isolated system. We could do all the manual testing in that system, and that was okay. But today, with the cloud, with the microservices, with all those kind of APIs, it's so interconnected that it's very hard to just only focus on the system we are in front of. And that's especially an area where we manual testers can do a lot of very useful work, because it's my experience that it's often hard to find someone in the company which have that global view on all the applications. Often you find people, developers, analysts that have an in-depth knowledge of one system, but having the complete view, it's hard to find. And to illustrate that, some time ago, I was part of a project, and we were doing UAT testing for a new system, and we were in the billing team. So we were in the component which was at the end of the chain. And during the UAT testing, which was running for 2 weeks, we didn't see any information coming in the system. So every status meeting, we had to report billing team, 0 test executed. And then we insisted to the developers and to the test manager, please give us access to the log files. Give us access to know and to analyze, or at least to try to pinpoint what is exactly the reason. And in the beginning, the developers, they were very against, and they were hesitating, and they were giving arguments like, yeah, you don't understand, you cannot read them. But finally, because the pressure was so high, they give us access, and we start digging into the log files. And then we found, for example, that mapping between interfaces was not correctly set up. Mandatory fields were not completed, or fields were mapped, or the values were mapped wrongly. And so with that kind of information, we went back to the developers and we said, hey guys, because there was a ping pong game playing between the different teams and the application, and finally we said, okay, here is the issue, please solve it. And then finally we were able to do some tests. Another reason why it's important to think locally is to have a good view on what are the interfaces, especially if you are in the phase of integration testing, end-to-end testing with interfacing systems, regardless if the interface is within your own, under your own control, or if you work with external. It's good to know what are those interfaces, and to check, are those interfacing systems, do they have a test environment as well? Are they always up and running, or do we need to respect some time slots to do our test? And in some cases, do we need to pay to use an interfacing system? For example, in insurance, banking applications, it's often the case that if you use external payment modules, that even in test phase, every transactions you need to pay to the third party. So that's something we need to keep in mind. And a last reason for doing that is the test data consistency. And if we create our test data in one system, we need to be that it's consistent. If we create a customer in system A and we need the same customer in system B, then we need to ensure that the data is correctly set up, regardless if we do it manually, system by system, or if we let restore the databases in all the system. We need to keep it in control. That's, for example, when you do time traveling. Time traveling, meaning you put your whole system or your ecosystem and you put the time in the future. Like we did in a recent project. It was an insurance system consisting of 5 modules. And we had accounts, we had claims, we had billing, and we were defining a very complex timeline of scenarios. And we had to define, okay, on day 1 for test case 1, we need to do in system A something. For test case 2 at day 1, we don't have to do anything. And on the next day for system for test case 2 we have to do something, but not for test case 1. So it was a very complex task to come up with that complete scenario, to keep in mind all the modules and what is the consequence of doing action in one system, what is the impact on the other one, what is the impact on the time traveling, and if we missed we missed a date, what is the consequence and what is the impact on the test cases that were already executed. And that's where I believe that manual testers will and remain have a big role to play. And for me, I see the role of manual testing more shifting from the real execution to what I call the designing phase, to think about all those complex things, and where that's where we have to play our role. And so to summarize, I think survival of the fittest, it's not for the smart, it's not for the fastest, but I think it's for the smartest. And maybe if there are test automators in the audience, and if you think that I'm a big basher of test automation, no, not at all. And for me, they need to be complementary. It's not only about test automation, it's not only about manual testing, but we need to think in an efficient way to combine and to think what is the best combination to use both kind of test types. And if we use those 4 skills, or if we adapt our attitude or way of thinking, then with those 4 messages, then we are certainly prepared for the future and for any kind of new fast rates that will come out our way. Thank you.
Very good. Great talk. It reminds me so much of these horror stories in my career of automation testing being trusted implicitly, and then like the entire website just won't load if someone opens a browser, but no one's thought to have anyone actually open it. So yeah, definitely something people need to think about.
I see some in the Q&A. So someone is asking, test automation seems to be getting a higher salary. What do you think about it? And is there a way to earn more for a manual test engineer? Yeah, very good and relevant question. And that's what we see, that those more techie jobs are seems to be more highly evaluated. And that's often the reason why manual testers are shifting towards more techie job, just because they say, yeah, I can get a higher salary. Well, I think if you prove your value in the real architectural activities, in the designing activities, then that will be something that cannot be just fade out by replacing you by an automation test specialist. Because, and I see it at a lot of projects, that it's hard to find testers who have a really in-depth overview. You don't have to be a full business specialist, but at least to have the right knowledge and to see what is the interaction. And then once you have that view, then you can come up with the risks you see. Just like the example that I said with the paying interfaces. I know when I was raising that risk on the meeting, everyone was looking and staring at me like, what are you telling? And I say, yeah, if you continue like this, you will get the bill. Do you have money in your budget for that? So, yeah, I would say shift more to the analytical design phase, and then you can prove your value. And don't be afraid to dive into the technical stuff without the need to be a programmer, not at all. But try to read a log file. And I learned that technical people, when they saw that you are interested in, that you do some effort, then they will be, they are more willing to help you. How to communicate with dev who is completely introverted and refuse to participate in FICA? How to avoid confrontation? Yeah,
We'll just
yeah.
do it quickly.
Very good as well. Anyway, I think any people who is introvert try to talk about what is fascinating those people in their free time. Do they have a hobby? Maybe it's stupid proposed, but look him up on Facebook and try to find out, is he playing soccer, is he biking, and try to find something outside the professional context to get a connection. And confrontation between dev and QA, and in such a FICA, that's not the place where you start blaming. It's just for testers that you listen, that you try to capture as much as information, and try to find your allies, and typically by taking a coffee, or in the smoking area, or during the lunchtime, trying to put something on the table, and indirectly try to make your point, to put your concern on the table, without really to go in the blaming model, because that, of course, won't work.
Try and make friends.
Yeah.
Well, it was great listening to you. Appreciate it. We'll be back in just a few minutes, and we'll end right about now. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.